I'm going to take you through a brief overview of World War I, the major events that happened. So it started in August 1914, after a series of events sparked by the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand of Austria. So initially arranged at two alliances, that would be the Triple Entente, or the Allies, Britain, France, and Russia, and the Central Powers of Germany, Austria-Hungary, and the Ottoman Empire. But, as you know, from watching the intro video, other countries did join in later, including the U.S. So let's go ahead and get started here. If you want to know the primary causes of the war in more detail, look at the previous video I uploaded, and I've got them on there. I'm going to switch over here to a map that I have, and I hope that you guys can see that all right. It looks okay here. We're going to go through the map of what happened. So as you can see, the yellow here is going to be all the Central Powers. The green on the right and the left are going to be the Allies. This map is also in your class materials in SharePoint. All right, so with the outbreak of hostilities, Germany sought to utilize the Schlieffen Plan, which called for a quick victory against France so that troops could be moved east to fight Russia. So they wanted to move into France here, have a quick victory so that they could put all of their might into fighting Russia. The first step of this plan called for German troops to move through Belgium. This action, right here, this action led to Britain entering the conflict, as it was obligated by treaty to defend the small nation of Belgium. In the resulting fighting, the Germans nearly reached Paris, but were halted at the Battle of Marne, which is right here, the first Battle of Marne. In the east, Germany won a stunning victory over the Russians at Tannenberg, while the Serbs, down here, the Serbs threw back an Austrian invasion of their country. Though beaten by the Germans, the Russians did win a key victory over the Austrians at the Battle of Galicia. So, in 1914, it looks like Germany did very, very well for itself. They surprised the Russians. They did move in here to try and take France. They didn't quite, get what they wanted there, but they were pretty strong early on. Serbia did a good job defending itself from Austria-Hungary, and then Russia, lost early on to Germany, but then won against Austria-Hungary. All right, let's go to 1915. A stalemate ensues. If y'all don't know what a stalemate is, it's the part of chess where nobody wins. So both teams are like at a stalemate is basically what it means, that nobody wins at that point. With the beginning of trench warfare on the Western Front, again, looking at the map, the Western Front is going to be, the Western Front is going to be this red line here. The Eastern Front is going to be this red line, because that's in the east, this is in the west. So, with the beginning of trench warfare on the Western Front, Britain and France sought to break through the German lines, right here. That's going to be the Western Front. I got to find my spot. Okay. Wishing to focus its attention on Russia, Germany launched only limited attacks in the West, where they began the use of poison gas. In an effort to break the stalemate, Britain and France conducted major offensive operations at Neuve-Chapelle, Artois, Champagne, and Loos. In each case, no breakthrough occurred and casualties were heavy. Their cause was bolstered in May when Italy entered the war on their side. In the east, German forces began operating in concert with the Austrians. Unleashing the Gorlice-Tarnow offensive in May, they inflicted a severe defeat of the Russians and forced them into a full retreat. All right, so the Britain and France tried to go on the offensive here to break through this line here where the Germans were, but they couldn't quite do it. Italy did enter the war on their side. And then German forces started getting together with the Austrians, and they started planning their own offensive in May of 1915, and they defeated the Russians over here and forced them into a full retreat. So again, Germany doing very well for themselves, coming on pretty strong. France and Britain and Russia are having a rough time with Germany, Austria, Hungary. And we haven't gotten to the Ottoman Empire yet, but they will join later. Speaking of which, in 1916, it is a war of attrition. So I'll tell you what that means here in a second. A big year on the Western Front. 1916 saw two of the bloodiest battles of the war, as well as the Battle of Jutland, the only major clash between the British and German fleets. All right, so that'll be up in here somewhere where the ships had a battle. Not believing that a breakthrough was possible, talking about here, not believing that a breakthrough was possible, Germany began a battle of attrition in February by assaulting the fortress city of Verdun. All right, so they actually did not have any confidence that France and Britain were going to be able to break through. So they went ahead and went on the offensive right here at the Battle of Verdun in France. With the French under heavy pressure, the British launched a major offensive at the Somme in July. While the German attack at Verdun ultimately failed, the British suffered horrific casualties at the Somme for little ground gained. While both sides were bleeding in the west, Russia was able to recover in the east and launched the successful Brusilov offensive in June. Okay, so again, Germany went on the offensive here, won this but suffered some casualties there. Britain, yes, actually I got that switched, sorry. So Battle of Verdun was where the Allies won, but they suffered casualties. Battle of Somme, I believe that's how you say that, Somme, but the Central Powers won, but they suffered casualties too. So they were two of the bloodiest battles were in 1916, and neither side really benefited from it. Briefly, I wanted to mention that there was stuff going on in the Middle East and Africa, so the Middle East here and Africa down here. With the armies clashed in Europe, fighting also raged across the belligerent colonial empires. In Africa, British, French, and Belgian forces captured the German colonies of Togoland, Cameroon, and Southwest Africa. Only in German East Africa was a successful defensive effort mounted. In the Middle East, British forces clashed with the Ottoman Empire, down here. After the failed campaign at Gallipoli, Battle of Gallipoli, right here, the primary British efforts came through Egypt and Mesopotamia. After victories at Romani and Gaza, British troops pushed into Palestine and won the key battle of Megiddo. So all that to say, it wasn't just fighting here, they were also fighting in Africa and Europe. Sounds like the Allies did pretty well in both of those places. All right, 1917, America joins the fight. Their offensive capability spent at Verdun, talking about the Germans. The Germans opened 1917 by falling back to a strong position known as the Hindenburg Line. So basically they're saying, okay, we're not strong enough to hold where we were in Verdun, so we're going to fall back to the Hindenburg Line. The Allied cause was bolstered in April when the United States, angered by Germany's resumption of unrestricted submarine warfare, entered the war. So we came in 1917 as the U.S. Returning to the offensive, the French were badly repulsed later that month at Chemin des Dames, leading some units to mutiny. Mutiny means like, we don't want to do this anymore. We want to do the opposite of what we're doing. We're going to kind of go against what the leaders want to do. So forced to carry the load alone, the British were the British, and they won limited victories at Arras and Messines, but suffered heavily at Passchendaele. Despite some success in 1916, Russia began to collapse internally as revolution broke out and the communist Bolsheviks came to power. Seeking to exit the war, they signed the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk in early 1918. Okay, so in 1917, it's not looking good for the Allies. The French are very spent. They even have some of their people wanting to give up. Russia has got their own little revolution going on, and so they signed a treaty to exit the war in early 1918. So British, are the only ones there really fighting most of this war, waiting on other people to come and help them, like the U.S. So it looks at this point in time, it looks like Germany and the Central Powers are much stronger. Let's go to 1918, a battle to the death. With troops from the Eastern Front, right here, troops from the Eastern Front freed for service in the West, German General Erich Ludendorff sought to inflict a decisive blow on the tired British and French before American troops could arrive in large numbers. Launching a series of spring offenses, the Germans stretched the Allies to the brink, but were unable to break through. Recovering from the German onslaughts, the Allies counterattacked in August, just a few months later, with the 100 Days Offensive. Slamming into the German lines, the Allies won key victories at Amiens, Meuse-Argonne, and shattered the Hindenburg Line. That line we were talking about earlier that the Germans felt safe at. The Allies shattered it. Forcing the Germans into full retreat, Allied forces compelled them to seek an armistice on November 11th, 1918. Armistice is, it's like a peace treaty. All right, so the aftermath. So, okay, the Germans are defeated because they gave up, right? The Allies actually came through and won, which looks like a bit of an underdog story from the way things were just a year before. So let's talk about what happened directly after the war was over. Opening in January 1919, the Paris Peace Conference was convened to draft the treaties that would officially end the war. Dominated by David Lloyd George of Britain, Woodrow Wilson of the U.S., and George Clemenceau of France, the conference redrew the map of Europe and began to design the post-war world. Having signed the armistice under the belief that they would be able to negotiate a peace, Germany was angered when the Allies dictated the terms of the treaty. Despite the wishes of Wilson, a harsh peace was inflicted on Germany that included a loss of territory, military restrictions, heavy war reparations, and acceptance of sole responsibility for the war. Several of these clauses helped create the circumstance that led to World War II, which we will talk about eventually. All right, so I know that was a very quick overview, but I think that what we'll see as we go forward talking about World War I is a bunch of these little pieces we talked about today in more detail. I wanted to give you a quick overview just so you can know how the Allies were aligned, how the Central Powers were aligned, and how the fighting the different back and forth between the two. But we'll cover some of these details here in the next week or so, and I look forward to looking at this closer with you. All right, thanks guys. Have a good one.